Alright, today is going to be a bit of a different tone than my previous New World coverage because, honestly, I've stopped caring as much. I don't say that as a unilateral condemnation of the game, like, I just don't care at all. I say that as someone who cared too much, like way too much, and was letting it affect the coverage. I was looking forward to New World for quite a long time. More than Anthem, more than Fallout 76, and I do believe that this game deserves to be compared to both of those titles, more than even Red Dead Redemption 2, and as a result, I let my own sense of letdown infect the content I was producing. It wasn't just broken, it was broken in a way where I couldn't get the experience that I personally wanted. It wasn't just a game experiencing problems, it was a game that had let me down on a personal level. And I've realized now that this level of investment is only going to hurt me and isn't really healthy. New World is fundamentally broken, not just standard exploits or typical bugs, massive, growing, twisted gaps in the design that are built upon a foundation full of holes. And rather than raise my own blood pressure talking about how horrible that is, as I lament the fact that it's not even enjoyable or playable in a lot of circumstances now, I think it's high time I look at it through a much more analytical lens. A lot of what I'm about to discuss has been percolating through Reddit for about a day or so. Some more, some less, but the exploits I will talk about are almost all discovered, public, or being worked on. I have no idea what the timeline looks like in terms of fixes, that is, but I'm not going to reveal any new game-breaking bugs in the video, despite knowing about at least one that I have now reported through the proper channels. Whether or not it gets fixed before other people find it, I don't know. At least 2 other people know of it as of right now. We'll see. But without further ado, let's look at New World as it exists right now with known issues and discuss the game's possible future. First thing to know is that Amazon Game Studios laid off roughly a third of their software engineer staff in 2019. That's smack dab in the middle of this game's development cycle and probably didn't have a great impact on the title. Flash forward, and right now, as New World is reeling under the strain of a global release, AGS, Amazon Game Studios, is looking to hire over 160 new developers, nearly 70 of which would be software engineers. It's clear, to me, at least personally, that they are trying to deal with the current New World crisis, and whether or not this works remains to be seen. More hands on deck means more fixes, means better playability, ideally, optimally, and that kind of resource influx will take time to implement, but it might be a reassurance that the company is sticking by this launch even through tough times. We'll see. Speaking of tough times, that is exactly what we are in when it comes to New World. I won't rehash the existing problems I talked about because, thankfully, many of them are currently fixed. There was an invincibility exploit where lag could make characters unkillable in wars and actually make all the projectiles disappear and make the damage not register, all sorts of things. It was really bad. There was a corruption portal glitch that made the end game unplayable and bottlenecked the rest of the dungeons, and a few more issues as well that the development team has rapidly been able to patch, and those efforts, I have to say this, are much appreciated. However, looking toward the future of this game, it's important to discuss what is happening when they fix these issues. For starters, the corrupted portals were re-enabled, only to have the major breaches disabled again within something like 12 hours because they were giving too much loot. Having played and farmed them myself during that short window, I can attest to the rewards being generous, but no one had been able to even play them for 3 weeks straight. So why not just let people get a little boost? Nope, not gonna happen. Instead of allowing some increased rewards to percolate through the economy, which desperately needs it by the way, Amazon decided to shut them down really quickly, in a decidedly anti-player move that only served to further exacerbate relative player discontent. Combine this with a reality where the dungeon tuning orbs require something like 2,400 corrupted slivers, or higher tiered equivalents, which are bound per player, right? You can't trade them. And it was clear that dungeons, or expeditions, were not able to be completed with any degree of consistency. They would require, just as guesswork here, something like 10 to 20 hours of grinding just to play one. Imagine if in World of Warcraft, to play one dungeon towards the end game, you had to grind for like 20 or let's say 15 hours straight, just you, doing the same activity over and over, just to get the materials to be able to try it one time. And honestly, it's pretty ridiculous. Still, that's not even the half of it, because underneath the skewed balancing and all the other problems is a broken foundation. Amazon was able to alleviate some of the war exploits by hamstringing nearly all area of effect abilities. Where we stand now, multiple of the AoE skills in New World simply don't work reliably or conflict with each other, such as the Ice Gauntlet Snowstorm or the Fire Staff Flame Pillar, and these problems seem to only increase as they deploy patches. Speaking of patches, that might actually be the biggest problem in the game right now. As you can see in the background, there are some bugs and exploits being displayed on screen periodically. And some of these existed before the most recent patch, but some didn't, and were actually caused by it. One example would be how the auction house didn't function for players that were offline, and instead of getting orders fulfilled while you slept, your gold would just disappear. That's a big deal, especially in an economy like this, because gold is incredibly valuable and people need it. There's a deflation crisis, but more on that later. And I'll be the first to congratulate Amazon for announcing that they have a potential fix for this particular problem, where everyone will get the gold they are owed, which is great. But it was a problem born of their endeavor to fix completely separate exploits. There was a problem discovered as a result of the servers allowing client-side authority, which is horrifying and should be for everyone, where the game window could be dragged around the screen right in the middle of different actions that were happening in-game. And 6 ways to Sunday, you could become invulnerable. There were more or less common versions of this, but the problem at its root cause is client-side authority, and that problem isn't really going away. As they tried to fix this, they broke the auction house. They broke the housing system. People were logging back into their house being gone, apparently, and they almost certainly broke a number of other features which have yet to be discovered. After that, there were gold duplication glitches because the player sending coin could disrupt the transaction at the proper time and allow it to fulfill, but never execute on their end. Honestly, that one is probably a good thing because the game is facing an economic deflation crisis where the coin is being pulled from the world faster than it's created, and this is totally destroyed. I'm not even being hyperbolic. The economy is in absolute ruins on almost every single server. It has totally destroyed the economic function on a massive, complex, multi-faction, multi-auction house regional map. But those are issues that have been probably pushed to the top of the priority list and will likely be targeted soon. There are a lot more here. The next big one is that's making the rounds right now, right? There's a bunch of big ones, but the next one making the rounds is that Amazon allows players to inject code into the chat box. The fun version of this is posting images of sausages and nuts or milk or whatever. The bad version is impersonating game masters, crashing other players' games, or using massive yellow squares above your head to flashbang the screen of everyone else around you. These are exploitable issues. Simply mousing over the chat box of an infected message will literally crash your game. And this is a result of their framework allowing HTML to be injected into the chat box. I don't know specifically how, but it's starting to spread. And I have trouble thinking of a worse problem in any MMO, because even accidentally mousing over certain text, at least allegedly, and I know for a fact that it can crash if you click on it, but I'm hearing reports that it can crash if you simply mouse over it, can crash your game. While linked items can also be impersonated, right? They can create a fake linked item, which means the entire chat box, linking framework, and trade functionality of this game outside of the main auction house is totally destroyed until they deploy a fix. I could spend a lot more time going over individual issues, but here's a clip that does kind of a nice job summarizing just how broken the stat system and gearing systems are in New World.
What the fuck? So I go from 5 equipment strength to 4 when I take off these 9 strength gloves. Wait, why are these gloves? There's too many things happening at once. Why doesn't anything work in this game? Dude.
There's no end. You can have 2 life staffs equipped and then glitch them into providing triple the intended rate of fire by weapon switching back and forth. A great axe ability already considered to be overpowered by itself was broken by the new patch and became permanent. An army of bot players are starting to make their way to various different resource positions, and gold farmers, or gold sellers I should say, are running rampant. The narrative story, the main quest chain, that ends at a boss called the Well Guardian, which requires a group of 5, probably more, for a grueling fight against an ogre enemy, and that quest is only accessible to those that have it, or who have that particular segment of the quest, which means that any server that does not have a super high population is now stranding players in a position where they might literally be unable to ever complete it. This is a product of the player base becoming extremely top-heavy, which happened early on and is now just much more exacerbated, and the quest locking out anyone who isn't on that specific phase, while also requiring a full group at the very least, but the result is that many players are stuck with no option to overcome that barrier. There are item weight exploits, thereby reducing item carry weights every time you unequip and re-equip the items or the bags, whatever it is. And if you're online when the servers go down for maintenance, you can lose your in-game house, because that makes sense. There are really strange bugs where players are accessing the wrong character, it looks like, with items that aren't theirs, stats that aren't theirs, and that one is really strange to me, but I hope it doesn't get worse, even though most bugs in this game inevitably get worse. Plus a nearly never-ending parade of other issues. Skills going through the floor, server names bugged, server transfers being broken, perks giving different bonuses or not working at all, and that's most of them. Gems being broken, multiple health regen buffs from food stacking on top of each other somehow. Spam crouching and heal abilities, which lets you rapidly regenerate health in a way that totally breaks the game completely. Or, one of the worst ones, players spawning dead into the game, which leads them to be locked in a state where they can't respawn, and they just can't play the game now. They are forced to submit bug reports on the forums and seek manual help with this, but all combined, the list of issues is so long it cannot be summarized in one single video, and it only grows with every consecutive patch. One particular Reddit thread stuck out to me that was posted by someone claiming to be a developer themselves, and what they said made a lot of sense. The post is linked down below in the description, but I'll read some of the more important bits right now. Quote, based on the number of game-breaking bugs that existed at launch, with many of these existing even in beta, it's clear that AGS, Amazon Game Studios, doesn't have a healthy QA process in place, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. There's hope that they could get these things fixed, but the fact that so many game-breaking bugs were introduced in this patch is worrisome. It suggests that the game is full of spaghetti code. In other words, it means that the game's code was developed in a way that prevents changes from being easily implemented. For those that aren't developers, it may come as a shock to learn that in enterprise code, we ideally have a code base of tests that is nearly as large or larger as the actual code base itself. Basically, we write an application that tests our main application. Frankly, I'm not a game dev, so I can't speak to whether this practice is common there, but the point is that these are the lengths we go to ensure that adding new code doesn't break existing code. End quote. This would make a lot of sense. Again, I'm not a developer myself, but I do have some rudimentary knowledge of it, and it starts to explain how the game seems to actually decrease in stability the more they patch it. There are more exploits or broken mechanics now than there were before the patch, and that type of issue isn't going to just miraculously fix itself, because the more you do to solve the problems, the more they spread. Continuing on, quote, in other words, if a fix would have taken a developer 10 hours during original development, it will now take somewhere between 100 to 1,000 hours to make the same fix. So, if I had to take a guess, AGS, Amazon Game Studios, is finding themselves at the same place I've seen many companies. They could stop almost all of their development and work on fixing the underlying code base, or they can continue adding to the technical debt by slowly rolling out new features and deal with the fact that fixing a bug in one place often creates a new one elsewhere. It seems to me like the developer team is under immense pressure, so they'll almost definitely go with the latter. But this likely means that this patch won't be an exception, and with each patch, we will see critical, if not game-breaking bugs on a weekly basis. End quote. That was an eloquent and possibly expertise-backed way of saying what many players are probably already thinking, and what we have now seen on multiple occasions would corroborate this idea, and that is New World is in a state of flux, as issues, game-breaking issues, not minor exploits, are being discovered rapidly, without remorse, and consistently. The game studio, AGS, is hiring dozens of new software engineers and developers to perhaps help with this problem, but there will be a lag time before they find, integrate, and utilize them, meaning that the game, short-term, is in a very bad position. There is fun to be had. There are good things about the title, absolutely, without question, but we are witnessing an Anthem-level release disaster that will probably go down in gaming history as one of the most technically botched yet incredibly popular MMO releases to ever hit the market. The game still holds hundreds of thousands of players, spread across a global network of way too many servers, and a lot of those servers are now depopulating and in a really bad position, but the future for now is bleak, with a light at the end of a massive tunnel. If they can pull through the immediate headwinds, there's a future, but man, it's looking pretty rough. I hope it works for them, despite the framework itself appearing to be fundamentally broken at every single turn. But that's about it. If you want to support, there are links down below. Odyssey, which is a YouTube platform alternative. Locals, where $5 a month gets you completely ad-free versions of all the content, as well as the audio podcast format. Another YouTuber to check out. Merch, social media, etc., etc. But I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, and have a nice night.